Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of HR Voices podcast. I'm your host, Mary Asante, and with me here today I have Tania Harland. Hi Tania.
Good morning, Mary. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. How are you doing?
Yes, good, thank you. Busy, but all good.
Good, excellent. Tania is the founder of HR Diagnostics, and today she's kindly agreed to join us to talk about HR audits and the benefits to HR consultants and particularly the clients that HR consultants supports. And so before we dive into the topic, I'd like to give Tania the opportunity to introduce herself.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mary. So, Tania Harland, I've been working in HR well over 20 years now. I was working in the corporate world for the first 14 years. In the last 7-8 years, I've been working as a consultant, running my own consultancy business. And I've stumbled across the requirement for a digital HR audit tool for my own kind of personal reasons. And that's how I founded HR Diagnostics 3 years ago. And it's kind of evolved from that, from me personally wanting to use it in my consultancy business. So, yeah.
Excellent, exciting. And you launched in January, so very exciting times for you and HR Diagnostics, isn't it?
Yeah. So obviously came up with the idea 3 years ago. Beta pilot tested it all of 2025 with some awesome HR consultants who gave me great feedback. Launched in January, and yeah, it's going well. It's a good product for commercial opportunities for consultants. So yeah.
Excellent. And I think, again, a lot of the time our listeners will know that I like getting to the basics, okay, and demystifying technologies because we do use lots of terminologies, lots of acronyms, and a lot of the time we think it means the same thing to everyone, but it doesn't always, right?
Yes.
It's a bit like I delivered a keynote and I was talking to somebody who is a musician, and I said, I delivered a keynote, and they went, what is that? And I went, oh. So even something like that, you think, oh, it's generic, everyone knows. It's like, oh, you're giving a speech or a talk on stage and stuff like that, but no, it means different things to different people
So
when
true.
you are talking to them. So I said, we are going to be talking about HR audits. Kindly shared that on your quest to find a digital audit tool, you developed HR Diagnostics. So for anyone listening and who's probably not on the same page, let's bring all of us on the same page to have a meaningful conversation, right? What is HR audit?
Yeah, good question. And actually, like you said, there's so many different terminology, isn't there? So some people call an HR audit like a HR health check, and they prefer that. Some people might call it HR compliance assessment. So, like you say, lots of different ways of kind of describing it. But I'd say its most basic, HR audit is a structured review of how a business is managing its people legally, operationally, culturally. So are there contracts of employment in place? And actually, it's surprising how many employers actually don't have contracts of employment in place. Policies, purpose. So the process is being followed. Is the documentation doing what it needs to do before something goes wrong? And I think really, here's what I think consultants sometimes miss. An HR audit isn't just a compliance exercise. It's actually a commercial conversation starter. So when you sit down with a client and you show them exactly where they're exposed, what the risks actually mean for them, and what needs to happen next, it's not a box ticking exercise. It's actually advisory work. It's what the client pays for. So I think every client should be doing this. They should have it in their toolkit because it gives a reason to have a structured, credible conversation with a client at any time. And it almost always uncovers something that needs fixing. a great opportunity for upselling.
Yeah, that is, I think, an interesting one, because in the HR consultancy world, I know that lots of consultants use audits as a foot through the door thing. When they
Yeah,
have a conversation with a potential client, okay, let's find out what you've actually got in place, what policies, what contracts, what procedures, what is your culture like, how are your leadership working with your staff and all that, just to really gather a full or the bigger picture of
yeah,
what is going on in that organization, and then sort of use that to really form the baseline of that potential client consultant relationship for them to be able to service the client better and to add better value
yeah.
to the client, right?
Yeah, because without knowing the basic legal must-have, whether they've got them or not, it can make it quite difficult if you are supporting like an employee relations case, and actually if they haven't even got the basics in place, it does add a bit more complexity to it.
Great. So, what are the benefits? Let's break it down a bit, because we are talking about the clients that HR consultants support, or it could be in-house as well. Let's not get it wrong. Sometimes some in-house, it may be a new head of HR, new HR director, or somebody come in, or the business may have changed so much that they need an audit to be able to move on. So let's talk about the employer and or the client, and then the role of HR in audits. So
Yeah.
maybe the first is, let's talk about what are the benefits to the clients or the employer of carrying out an extensive and a good audit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, it's going to give them reassurance and peace of mind that actually if they go through an audit, even if they've got gaps, at least they can remedy those gaps. And actually at the end of it, they should be compliant. And that should give them peace of mind. But I think also the financial loss there, if they don't have things in place and issues occur, things go wrong with the employment relationship, it can be really costly. I mean, we know as HR consultants supporting clients, they can get taken to an employment tribunal. We know, like, there's, for example, with disability discrimination, 2022, 2023, there was a £1.7 million discrimination payout. These are real world kind of risks there for employers. Okay, that's a bit extreme, but there is a lot of legislation they need to be aware of, and they don't have that HR knowledge. Whereas if they go through an audit and somebody like a HR consultant who's knowledgeable and has an understanding of employment law, they can take them through that journey and get those risks remedied, and give them that peace of mind ultimately, and reduce costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think a lot of the time, audits are really good, especially either it's the start of the journey to find out where clients are and to support them, or if they've been your client for a long time, sometimes you know and you assume and whatever what is going on, but going through an audit can either confirm or not what you think is actually going on and what you think is actually taking place and stuff. And it really, I think, for the consultants, one of the key benefits is it establishes the baseline and it helps you come up with a plan and to
Yes.
prioritize with your client what you need to do or what you are going to do to be able to deliver and to add more value, and also to align most of the time with their goals and the business direction as well, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
much as people sometimes HR people are not commercially savvy, etc. When a consultant go in, one of your key objectives is to understand the business and to make sure that whatever you do is aligned with what the business is trying to achieve and supporting them as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think you, as an HR consultant, you need to demonstrate credibility, don't you? You need to demonstrate your knowledge. And actually, an HR audit is a great way of doing that, having that first conversation with that client, build that trust and credibility early on.
And you talked about on your quest to look for a digital tool, which is quite interesting because I think different people do audits. I've seen it done in different ways, right? Anything from using the good old spreadsheets or to just talking to people, taking notes and then typing it up and analyzing it, or to using online tools such as SurveyMonkey and the Microsoft Forms and things like that to really gather the information. Or some people just have templates, a set of questions developed where they either give it to the clients or sit down with a client and just go through it. So what does a good audit actually look like before we talk about the audit tool?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say, so I like visual things. So I've identified like a 4-step model, 4-pillar model, I call it. And this 4-pillar model is broken down obviously into 4 steps. The first one is assess. The second one is identify. The third one is evaluate. And the fourth is remedy. So the first, assess. So basically that's the structured audit itself. That's the systematic questions across the key HR and employment law areas, including recruitment, data protection, and so on. And those questions are mapped to current legislation. So you're not relying on memory or template. It's about having those structured questions, whether it's a 30-page Word document or spreadsheet or what have you. Secondly, the next step in that process is about identify, and that's the risk mapping part. So every finding should have perhaps a traffic lighted, critical risk, elevated risk, compliant, maybe red, amber, green. That shows the client what's going on. So it's a visual, it's immediate, it's hard to ignore. So it's all about identifying those risks and mapping those risks out. Third is about the evaluation. You mentioned about prioritization. It can feel overwhelming because actually if the client's not very compliant, there's a lot they need to do. And actually it's about breaking that down into bite-sized chunks and prioritizing the risks in terms of those that are more critical risks, which might have high financial consequences, potentially criminal risk, right down to obviously those more best practice risks, which obviously don't carry as much weighting to them. So about prioritization, not everything's equal. So it's about prioritizing those risks. And then fourth, it's about the remedy. And this is where the insight becomes action. So recommendations, a prioritized action plan, those type of things, a clear pathway for the client to understand, what do I need to do to fix this? And that's where that's the perfect opportunity for the consultant, where they can step in at that point, and it really opens up commercial opportunities for that consultant.
Excellent. So you've assessed, you've identified, you've evaluated, and I guess that conversation point is throughout all those steps, but probably so what we do now come with the remedy, which is recommended set of actions that potentially the client can put in place to ensure that, okay, going forward, this is what we're going to do. You mentioned a simple thing as contracts of employment. Well, some years ago, it was acceptable for somebody to start work and then at some point, whether it's within a day, 2 or 3 or a week, issue that contract of employment. Right now, legally, you must have the contract of employment in place before day one. And I think employers are probably aware that there are changes coming into place, changes coming in force, but not necessarily that it affects them or it impacts on them. And it's easier for somebody unintentionally who does, okay, in the past, I'll bring people in and this, that, and I'll put the contracts in place, job descriptions, and all those sorts of things, to have that shift of, okay, once you start thinking about employing somebody, once you're going through the recruitment process before the person arrives, you need to have that contract of employment in place to remain compliant, is one of those things. Another easy thing is that when organization starts, it's particularly SMEs who may not have an internal HR department or HR team to support them, and maybe don't have a consultant necessarily to support them because, oh, we're small and we are coping and we don't have any HR issues, is one of the things that we hear a lot as HR consultants, right? One of those things is that you going in or them getting to the point where suddenly there is an issue and we need to engage a consultant and not knowing where to start from or what, yeah, we do our own HR, what that even means is what an audit can bring to light in a way that helps shape.
And let's face it, the speed at which employment law is changing and evolving, I mean, it would be very difficult for an employer to keep up with all of these changes for the ERA 2025, trade union reform obviously coming soon, AI compliance. They can't be expected to keep up with all of that. And that's where the HR consultant's integral to kind of ensuring that they've got an oversight of how the employer is in terms of their compliance levels, and that if they do have gaps, they can help remedy those gaps.
So we'll talk about benefits of audits to the clients and to the consultant. But let's just say if an audit has taken place, okay, and things have been identified, what in your view typically happens? Are clients open then to conversations about it? Or are they, oh my goodness, I've got all these things to do, so my head goes in the sand and it stays there type thing? Or actually, great, thank you for identifying these things, let's work on putting it in place?
Yeah, I think every client, every employer is different, and some get it, some understand the risks and the complexities of the obligations you've got as an employer to an employee. Some clients, if they get that, they do buy into the audit. I've probably done well over 100 hours worth of audits, if I'm honest. So I think it's about positioning it that actually, if you can get the basics in place, yeah, you might feel like you've got no issues, you've got good culture, not very high turnover, etc. But actually, you just need one employee relations issue. You need one, I don't know, vexatious claimant or what have you. And actually, that really muddies the water. And it's really simple to get these things right from the outset. It's not difficult. We're talking about documentation. We're talking about getting the right contracts and policies and everything in place. And I think ultimately, in the long term, they're going to benefit from that. But it's about educating clients, businesses. And I think the ERA 2025 is like a perfect opportunity to really start having those conversations with UK employers, because look at the trade union reform, the right of access that trade unions are going to have in workplaces. And the fines are just insane. Like, the first breach, 75,000, the second breach, 150,000, the third breach, 500,000. And I don't think employers will realise the consequences of those. So we are really well positioned as consultants to kind of have those conversations right now, because the ERA 2025 gives us that kind of step in the door, so to speak.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Tania. For anyone listening to us, ERA 2025, that is the Employment Rights Act 2025. I mean, the Employment Rights Bill was discussed for a long time and it raised lots of excitement, panic, etc. in the HR world and in a lot of, in generally across employers as well. And then the bill was passed into an act in 2025. So it became the Employment Rights Act 2025. And I think it's being rolled out in stages, isn't it? Some things have already come into play, but others are still coming in. And one of those is the trade union reforms that Tania referred to. So it's going to impact on most employers. Compared to large employers, you think trade union, you think of large employers, you don't think about SMEs, you don't think about sort of startups and stuff like that necessarily, but that is going to push the boundaries a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this employers want over 21, I think. Is it 2021, something like that? So the really small SMEs, it's not going to impact them, but I mean, it's still a huge sector of the market that's going to employment and clients that are going to be impacted. And actually, I think also the qualifying period, the reduction from 2 years to 6 months qualifying period for unfair dismissal, that's another biggie, isn't it? So I just think there's loads of opportunities to be having those conversations with clients like now, really.
Absolutely. So, how does having a diagnostic tool or going through an audit using a credible audit tool?
Yeah, so I think previously, I can go on my own experience here, I'd have done manual HR audits. So I'd have my 20, 30 page Word document that I go through, rag it, red, amber, green, type up a report, etc. So heavily manually, very time consuming. I think having a digital tool is a professional tool, it's all there, every single question that you need to ask a client, and it captures all of that information and produces it into like a visual radial graph. So we talked about scores, different areas. So that, for example, HR Diagnostics has 9 categories in total, and each of those categories gets a score and a visual like heat map to show these are the areas where there are higher risks and these are the lower risks. So great tool, a great thing for like prioritization. And most of all, I mean, are you talking about from the client perspective or the consultant's perspective, would you say? What was the question?
I think from a client's perspective, and then we can look at it from a consultant's perspective as well.
Yeah, so the client gets a professional, structured tool that's easy to use and gets the not just the kind of output, like the risk report telling them exactly where they score overall, but also by section. They also get structured action plans. So an implementation roadmap to say, right, the first 30 days, these are the kind of critical risks. This is the critical area we need to focus on, then 60-day, 90 days. So it gives a real structured pathway for them, as well as the kind of support that they're going to get from the HR consultant as well. So, yeah.
Great. And for HR consultants, then, and we all know, I mean, you said, oh, for the past 7 or 8 years, I've been running my own HR consultancy. And HR consultants, each of us is at a different stage of the journey, right? There are people starting, there are people who may have been on this journey for as long as you have, and there may be people who have been on the journey for 30 plus years. But
Mm.
I think the beauty of audits is that it really affects everybody because, as I said at one point, people at the beginning of the journey might be a useful tool to knock on your potential client's door with, to offer it either as part of your service or an introductory something, or just sort of a pro bono thing, which a lot of us do from time to time at the beginning of our journey, especially just to get talking to clients. And then for those people who have been on the journey for a bit longer, again, it's still an important tool for existing clients from time to time to really find out where things are. Or when you start new conversations with clients, etc., to know where you are. So, I mean, audits, it's a bit like, okay, it's not a one-off thing, right? An audit is not a one-off thing because the report, as good and as extensive as it might be, is reflective of the
Now,
time of the audit.
yes,
And
yes,
post-audit, things will change.
yeah,
Let's say for argument's sake, you identified 5 key things that needed to be remedied and you put in place. That in itself will change things, right? So
yes,
you will still not be where you started.
yeah.
So if you take things in that context,
Mm.
how often should people be conducting HR audit?
Audits. Yeah, I think if we talk about before ERA 2025, I would say every 1 to 2 years would be acceptable. But I just think with the way the landscape is now, in terms of employment law, actually every UK employer should be having an audit done this year. And obviously the ERA 25 changes are going to still continue into 2027. So, it might be that it's once a year, but definitely at the moment, I think every employer is going to have some gaps because they're
And
probably.
that is interesting because you are saying, okay, the rate at which you do your audits must change because there's been a significant change in the employment law landscape, which is in line with regardless of whether it's HR audits, ISO audits, or quality audits, or whatever it is. Typically, when there's a significant change,
Yeah,
you need to conduct an audit to see
yeah,
whether what you have in place so is fit for purpose or what needs to change to meet the changes coming into the landscape, right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, agreed.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So for HR consultants then,
Yeah. So, I mean, when I'm doing webinars and I'm talking to consultants and getting feedback from them, and as I've kind of gone on this journey, like I say, first off, I wanted to develop this purely for myself, for selfish reasons. I realized that actually for consultants, and you've alluded to some of these things actually, if you're leaving the corporate world and you want to join the consultancy world, it's tough. We know that's why we've got the ecosystem of HRI, of other groups there to support the community, and also tools like HR Diagnostics, part of that ecosystem to help those people leaving the corporate world and joining the consultancy world. So I think audits is a brilliant way to have that first step in the journey with a new client, even if you offer it for free. So I know some people offer, they say like a free 1 hour HR health check. The reality is it's not just 1 hour, but because actually, if you do that, there will 99% of the time that will lead to some work, some upselling, particularly compliance reviews like contract review, policy, core policy, employee handbook, that type of compliance project. So if you are kind of needing to win new clients, you're just starting out, actually doing an audit and offering it for free could be a real good lead magnet. I think with existing kind of consultancies who have got an established client base, actually it's about kind of tapping into the existing clients to identify, well, where are their gaps? Because actually there will be gaps. If you've never done an audit for an existing client, probably 70% of the stuff they may not be compliant with. Because if you've just been helping them in terms of their recruitment or just more of a reactive, like doing the investigations on employee relations cases, you might not have actually got down to the nitty gritty of have they got these basic things in place. So great opportunity to upsell to existing clients and also bundle into retainers. So I think retainers are like gold dust, right? As an HR consultant, we like retainers because it gives us that consistent revenue month on month. And it's interesting when I talk to consultants, they say, I've got these retainers, but my client doesn't use me and I feel bad. And actually, if you're able to kind of include some additional kind of tools or resources or add-ons, so to speak, to make it feel like it's more valuable to the client, actually doing a 1 year annual audit for them and including that within the retainer is a great way of adding value to that retainer. So yeah, I think there's multiple ways of using the audit, but ultimately it's a revenue generator without a doubt. I think I've seen it happen. I've got testimonials from the existing consultants using it. So I think there's loads of opportunities out there, and now is the time to kind of tap into those commercial opportunities.
excellent. And that is an interesting thing because one of the key things for all consultants, regardless of where people are in their journey, is keeping their revenue pipeline and revenue streams sort of going, right? So having diverse revenue streams, whether it's through tools or partnerships or associates or different types of things, really do help consultants grow their business and to build a resilient, successful business, right? So that is actually quite an interesting one. And the fact that, okay, if somebody is paying you X amount as a retainer, then building in an audit once a year or something is probably a really good way of demonstrating value to your clients, especially those who may not be using your services as much as they probably should.
Should, yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And obviously they are paying for that kind of reassurance that they have got somebody on the end of the line when they need them. But yeah, I think sometimes, and I've experienced it myself. I've actually said to a client, look, you don't really need me. And I've given up that retainer because I'm like, morally, it doesn't feel right. But actually, and this was pre-HR diagnostics. Obviously, there are other things you can add in, loads of things. I mean, I mentioned Breathe HR and stuff like that, because obviously there's a referral bonus fee that you can get from using different HR information systems. So yeah, I think it's about kind of, first of all, thinking about what do you want your business to look like? What's your target audience? Who's your favorite client that you like working with? And then it's about looking at, well, what do they need? And then how can I make this a no-brainer for them so that this actual retainer package is really attractive to them and they feel like they're getting really good value for money.
Excellent. Great, Tania. Thank you very much for joining us and for talking to us about HR audits and then the benefits to HR consultants and then to the clients that we service. And for anybody listening to us and thinking, well, I either need to be doing this as an HR consultant or, ooh, I think my organization can benefit from this as an employer or a client, what's the one thing you want them to take away from this conversation?
Good question. Good question. I mean, obviously, I talk in the language of HR consultants, not so much in-house. I think, and audit's a good place for in-house, but I think it's less of a kind of need as it is for like consultants. So I would say the audit isn't the product. I'd say the audit is a positioning tool. And the consultants who use it well aren't just running compliance checks, they're actually changing how their clients see them, how they get paid, how they grow their practice. So every audit's a reason to have that deeper conversation. Every risk finding is an advisory opportunity, and every report is a demonstration that you're worth more than your hourly rate. And I think if you're not running structured audits, you're leaving money on the table and you're leaving clients more exposed than they should be.
Okay. And for the client?
So the one takeaway for the client are, if you just want peace of mind and be able to sleep at night, do an HR audit. However that audit comes, whether you want to do it manually or digitally, find out where you are with your compliance levels right now, because things are only going to get harder when it comes to employment law with the way things are evolving. So book in the diary with your consultant to do the audit, find out where you are, remedy those risks, and sleep well at night.
Excellent. And sleep is very important, especially for busy business professionals, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And finally, what are your top 3 tips?
Top 3 tips. Yeah, so I'd say number 1, stop waiting for a crisis. The audit is a preventative tool, so not a recovery tool. Use it proactively and you'll never be the consultant who gets called when it's too late, which none of us want that on a Friday at 5 o'clock, which often happens. Number 2, let the risk data do the talking. So I think if you do use a digital HR audit tool, actually visually, the data does the talking. The client can see in black and white where they are, where they fare with their compliance levels. So you don't have to do a hard sell. You don't have to convince the client that they need help because they can see it themselves. What job really is to interpret the risks and guide what happens next. And number 3, I'd say treat every audit as the start of something, so not the end. The report is the opening, not the closing. Build the follow through. So the action plan is brilliant. It gives you a real structured like project plan in terms of, right, this is what I'm going to do with my client 30, 60, 90, 120 days. Let's plan in, right, I'm going to package up these things for you. So I'd say it's about the ongoing relationship with the client, and that's where the real commercial value lives.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much, Tania, for those top 3 tips and for joining us. It's been an insightful conversation. And for anyone listening who might want to find out a lot more or a bit more about HR diagnostic tools, I'm sure Tania will be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have, or about HR audits generally. Please do get in touch with us and we'll be more than happy to respond to your questions. Thank you very much for tuning in and for listening to us. And see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. Tune in next time.